Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Those of you here live and those that might be listening to, I guess what we're calling the Finding Good podcast, where we're going to explore the question of the week we outline. So we create questions based on the process we call transformational listening. We're going to show you that question. We're going to show you the science behind the question. But more importantly, especially for those of you live, but even for those of you that might be watching, we're going to show you how the questions work by having what we call a transformational listening conversation. And that's simply where somebody starts with the question of the week and for a certain amount of time can only ask questions, right? No what we call SOFA, suggestions, opinion, feedback, or advice. And so in the time, we're going to, again, go into what these questions are, why they work, and then after we've done that, really talk about the question of the week and how else you might be able to design that question, where you might be able to use it, and then how you might be able to personalize it. So welcome everybody. Yeah. So in the chat or out loud, I'd love to. Where are y'all from? I'm from Boise. Bree.
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
And for those that are new, Bree is my partner in crime here in Denver. Bree has also been along since the beginning of all of this, and she's the COO here. And then Amber on the other side. Where are you calling in from, Amber? Not Virginia. That I don't know, but yeah.
Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Fair. And Amber handles all of the relationship development and making sure that our members have what they need, and that she handles the stuff that I forget. That's really a bad way of describing that, but here we are. All right, so where are you else from? Okay, Godwill, good to have you back. Yeah, and then Amanda, I almost didn't recognize you. I think because last time you were in your car, right? Good to see you in a house today from Fort Mac, SoCal, Tanya, London. So we got a couple from over the pond there. Yeah, good to have you. Pavlos, did I say that correctly? Good to have you. And then West Lafayette, Indiana. Oh, yes. Yeah, Darren, good to have you here as well. Yeah. All right. So let's just start with, what is the question of the week this week, Bree? This is a fun one here. So this is sort of one of the basic is the wrong one, but when when people are just starting out in transformational listening, this is generally one of the kind of baseline questions that we'll have somebody work with. And the question is, what is one good thing that happened in your life this week? And the reason why this becomes this is sort of like a foundational question is because it has so many of the elements that make up all kind of finding good questions. The structure, if you will, is there, right? So I'd like to start in this with when your initial reactions to a question like that, just seeing that and this is for any of you here participating live. When you see a question like that, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Either about how it might be to ask it or how it might be to be asked that question. You go ahead, Darren.
Well, it's an easy question to ask, right? First thing in my mind though was, did something good happen to me this week?
Yeah, but I love that. That's likely the most consistent response. Initially we get asked that, what, did anything good? And what I loved about that response, Darren, is because it outlines one of the structural components in almost all of these questions, and that's what we call this positive assumption, right? So we're assuming that something good happened in your life. And the reason that we do that is that it actually makes it a little easier for you to think of, right? Because if I would ask did anything, and especially if you have kids, you've all had this experience, and you ask your kid, what did anything good happen in your day? What's likely their response?
Yeah.
Hello.
That nope. And it's not that nothing good happened. It's that because of brain design, we have a negativity bias, we have an efficiency bias. It's just easier to say no, right? In one level. And just as Darren kind of outlined right there, like when you ask that, it takes, did anything happen? It's actually easier for my brain to identify, like, here's all the bad things that happen. And that's actually a negativity bias with a ratio of like 5 to 1, 10 to 1 if you're a bit older, like some of us. But it's so much easier for your brain to identify what went wrong. And then when you said, what's a good thing? Now I have to actually burn a little more calories, do a little more energy, burn a little more energy on that. Other thoughts for those that, like, when you first see that question, what do you think? Darren said, I have to ask myself, right, if anything good happened.
So
Bree, what do you got?
I'll add for myself, this is actually, since we started this whole thing 3 years ago, this is now a nightly question between me and my husband.
Right.
And sit down at the dinner table. What was good about your day? Which has changed our conversation. So for me, this is like home base now, this question.
Yeah. And what is it? What is it that, and I love that, like, because it's either this one or the, what's the best thing that happened in your day? Like, those are probably the two most common I hear from people of like, hey, I'm asking this all the time. But what is it that you think has, that you feel has changed because of that one conversation?
Am I allowed to swear here, Brian?
Sure. I don't.
Okay, there's so much less bitching. Yeah. We are not complaining about our days anymore when we sit down at the dinner table. We're talking, we are chatting about like, this was the good thing that happened and asking more questions about that instead of just like the bitching and moaning about our days.
Yeah. And I'm going to paint with a broad brush. I'm thinking right near, anytime I talk about psychology, I'm married to a counselor. So I'm like, well, make sure you don't say something that she's going to correct me on later. But what, if you really just broad stroke it, whenever we're having a conversation, we can, and with another human being, there are positive spirals and negative spirals. And we influence those, right? And we influence them by little, and negative spirals are so much easier to create, right? It's for at the first level, it's safer to walk into a conversation with another human being and talk about the bad stuff. Like, it was raining yesterday, and I used this example with somebody in the coffee shop. Like, which conversation produces more risk? If I came in the coffee shop and said, oh, can you believe this rain? It's such a pain in the neck. Or if I came in and said, I love rain in 40 degrees. It's fantastic. It's just refreshing. Right? The second one presents a higher degree of risk because, like, now I've actually kind of, like, I'm talking about somebody I care about. Maybe Pollyanna, like, what is wrong with you? Like, it's so much easier to identify this, and it's so much, if you will, safer to have that conversation, right? And so just by implementing, like, what's one good thing or what's the best thing, like, it resets, right, where we're going with the conversation. So now to turn into talking about the negative, I actually have to consciously change that now, right? Like, I have to do a little more work to turn it back. But the thing that's happening over time that people in the transformational listening course understand, but that we go through, is that, like, once you get consistent in asking that, and I know, Darren, you've experienced this, like, you start expecting it. Yeah. Like, you're looking forward to that conversation, and your brain is looking forward to the experience of that conversation. And talking about the good things in our day allows us to re-experience those emotions. And then now our predictive brain says, oh, tonight, Bree and I are going to talk about the one good thing. And I've got to really look, because there's no good things today, right? What am I going to talk about today? So Bree, walk us through, if you would, the science behind this question.
Yes, absolutely. So I will share my screen here. So this is our question of the week outline. We always have our question up top, and then right below our question of the week, we always have the benefits in science behind this question, and it's always linked at the bottom as well. So our link to our article right here, this is always available to our members. But This one I referenced Berkeley University's Greater Good Science Center. They have an incredible psychology resource platform that's available. I would highly recommend anyone to check it out. But they dig into, for this particular one, a happiness practice, where often it is so easy for us to just overlook the small good things in our day, which ultimately have a pretty big impact on our outlook on life. So if you think about, only focusing on the bad things that happen to us, only focusing on the quote unquote negative things that happen to us, that's going to impact our mindset. When we spend a little bit more time focusing on the good things, we're wiring our brain to look out for those. So when we ask this question of somebody else, what is one good thing that happened in your life this week? We are asking them to build that new pathway in their brain of what is a good thing, and to look out for that and to pay attention to it. And the more that we do that, the easier it is to build that pathway. So I mentioned how, for my husband and I at dinner, we're asking this question every single night of what's a good thing that happened in your life today. Now it's easy for us to pull up that one good thing because we're on the lookout for it. We're paying attention to it. It encourages a little bit of mindfulness. It encourages a little bit more presence in our day to be able to take a step back and focus on those things. Because when you ask, how was your day? And you say, fine, you don't have to think about that response. But when you're asking a question like this, it actually requires you to think about a response and to think about what was that good thing, which brings us back into the moment, brings us to be a little bit more present, and perhaps identify maybe we had a little bit of input on that good thing and maybe how we can find more good in the future.
And that initial piece in there that it's easy to overlook the good things. I've been teaching brain science for 15, 20 years, and we always talk about your brain is designed to run away from bears. That's its primary job, right? And somebody explained how easy it is to overlook the good things by this simple analogy when it comes to running away from bears. Like, your brain is designed to keep you safe, to avoid risk, right? And so it's vitally important for my brain to remember where the bear was, what the bear looks like. In this case, it's social risk, but your brain doesn't really distinguish physical risk and social risk. They actually treat it very much the same way. And how he explained it was, I can overlook food or something nice 5 or 10 times and live. But if I miss the bear one time, I'm in trouble, right? And so that's what's happening as our brain, kind of our reticular activation system is filtering the stuff that our brain's actually going to pay attention to during the day. Is your brain says, there are these risk things, these dangerous things, these negative things. I can't miss them for survival purposes. So I'm going to naturally be more attuned to them, which means I'm going to miss these other things. And so just a simple question like this is actually about like making sure we don't miss them. And what I think it does, kind of how we explain it broader, is when we have these conversations, we're actually giving our brain a more realistic view of what the day is actually like, because our brain is naturally going to have a more negative view. And so just having one conversation is actually about giving it a more realistic view, and not because initially it can feel kind of Pollyannic, or we're giving this over positive view, but it's actually once we understand that ratio, this is actually about making sure our brain isn't making, if we will, mountains out of molehills. Yeah. So here's the part we get to practice it, which is where we need a volunteer. Yeah. Who would like to be the guinea pig and have Bree, I'm going to let you do this one, if that's okay. Let you do. I ask you to. Yeah, I should ask you. Yeah, permission, right? Would you like to do today's?
Yes, I will be the question asker.
Okay, so Bree is the question asker today, and raise your hand if you're willing to volunteer. Not everybody at once. How about we do it this way? How about Bree? You can go. You be the question asker. And I'll answer this time.
I was I'm happy to volunteer as well if you need an
Amber's there.
volunteer,
Yeah.
but-
Fair.
So have you brought
Donuts, Ryan.
Yeah, go ahead, Bree and Amber. That's
All
good
right.
too. Yeah. Well, and the reason I toss that out is like, and we do this on the practice sessions. Like, it is so easy, as for me specifically, to avoid getting into these conversations because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the teacher, I'm the one doing it. But like, I know in my own experience that if I don't engage on both sides of these, like, you can know this stuff all day long. And the reason why we have a membership area and practice sessions is like, you can know all about how to design them, how to deliver them, all the questions to ask. But if you're not doing it, like, your brain it's just not going to have the, if you will, muscle memory to get it. And you're not going to get the benefits that's happening on either side. But with that, Bree, go ahead, and Amber will be your guinea pig today, right?
You got the timer? All right.
So I was on mute. Yeah, I have the timer here. Thank you for the reminder. Go whenever you're ready.
Beautiful. Amber,
Hey.
one good thing that happened in your life this week.
I took my kids to brunch Sunday morning, which we rarely do because I have 4 boys and it's an event whenever we go anywhere. So, but we braved the public and we went to brunch and we ended up having a blast. We had a really fun time.
What was the motivation for going to our family brunch?
Kind of brunch. Yeah. So part of the custody schedule is I don't typically have the boys on the weekend, and I had them this weekend. And so I wanted to do something a little special and different. And and the place I took them is this, it's got a separate area for while you wait, because I don't know where brunch is where you guys are, but it's like a 2-hour wait wherever down here at the beach. So we took some Uno and just went and had fun, and just time to be together was really the motivation. Because normally when I have them at school week and we're busy schedules and we've got sports. And so it was just a time to break out of our routine and spend some time together.
Can you define for me what was good about this? I can make some assumptions, but I want to specifically.
Yeah, well, they're at ages now where it's possible to do it without a 3-year-old meltdown, you know? So there was it's like a fun new season where everyone, like, we don't need sippy cups and everyone can go to the bathroom by themselves. And like, so it's, that's good because it feels like, oh, I'm here with humans and not rabid monkeys that are tearing this restaurant apart. But also we laughed a lot. We had some fun conversation, and, you know, I brought Uno cards and we played Uno. We play a game called Spicy Uno, which, you know, makes it more energetic and involved. And so we just laughed and, you know, we're together, just that quality time. Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what, you know, you said you were together, it's quality time. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, sharing custody with their dad, there's only I only get them half of the time. So when I do have them, making sure that time really matters is important. And my older 2 are in high school, and we're coming close to college, you know, and I feel like that old adage, the days are long, but the years are short, is becoming very, very clear to me. And so, so having that time, just to enjoy one another is really important, because I know that we're not going to all be under the same roof, you know, sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious because I know you spend time with them the other days of the week
Mm-hmm.
at home. What made being out together different?
Yeah, it's always fun just to kind of change up the scenery, because when we're at home, we get into routines and everyone's got their place where everyone goes to their corners. But so this was, you know, time for us to kind of change up the scenery and just do something fun and different, you know, get chocolate chip pancakes and a hot chocolate and a plate of bacon. And, you know, it just was kind of fun to switch it up and do something. And that to me always feels like it breathes a little bit of energy back into the relationships, and it kind of reminds us that we actually enjoy hanging out with one another. So yeah, yeah.
I'm curious, what are your, this is gonna sound silly, what are your indicators that they like being with you while you're there? I know that sounds a
No,
little
that's a
silly.
good question, because I got two in high school, and sometimes they don't. They're there. They answer questions. I think mostly when we laugh together, that tells me that we're having a good time together, and they're enjoying the time that we are spending together. And it's genuine laughter. It's not like, I mean, I get a whole lot of, oh my God, mom, like, please don't say that. But yeah, just the laughter together is always a pretty good indicator.
Can you tell me about what that feels like in that moment when you're all laughing together?
Oh, it feels like this is the point. This is what it's all for. Like, these are the moments that this is matters, and this is what it's for. This is why I work hard. This is why I do certain things, to create certain spaces and, budget money so that we can do that. It's for moments like these where we really are connecting with one another.
And that's 5 minutes. A round of applause. Nice
Woo.
work.
You were one question away from getting me to cry, Marie.
I'm tearing up over here.
That's awesome. So I want to bring this week, I want to kind of broaden it out for all of those watching, and especially if this is your first time, or Amanda, you've seen it before, as well as Darren. Like, try to walk me through what you noticed. Like, what was impactful, what was happening with Amber in the conversation. And Bree did some textbook things in there in terms of like the follow-up questions and why we do it, and I'll kind of outline some of those, but I want to see what you all noticed in how Amanda was responding in the questions. Go ahead, Amanda, or Amber was, sorry.
I was noticing that you were asking questions that we could very easily assume. So like, what does it mean to actually be connected? Like, just to really take a moment to break that down. I think like if I asked that to my friends or family right now, they'd be like, you're weird. But I get in the value in taking a moment to actually say that, because maybe what we assume that is she has something different to add or something she wanted to share, but it never just came up.
Yeah, and Amber, what is your experience getting asked a question like that is like, and Bree even prefaced it like, this sounds obvious, right? Like,
yeah, I think I have felt this because as I've learned the transformational listening, but I never get to talk about it. It's finally a time where I get to think about it and talk about it. It's like, I think sometimes even I assume what I think about it.
Yes.
I don't, and I go, wait, oh, that's actually what, so it's clarifying. And it also is just such a gift to get to talk about something that people why would that ever come up in conversation? Like, it just doesn't naturally come up. So
yeah, especially beyond, you might say, I had brunch with my kids,
right.
And then it's, oh, how nice. Next topic.
Yeah. Right. Or usually if I have 4 boys, people are like, oh my God, good, wow, good, congratulations, you made it. Nobody died, So.
Yeah. And Darren, you had your mic off. Was there something you wanted to add in there?
Well, I was just going to say, so you could tell as Amber got to struggle with trying to articulate things, she couldn't respond as quick, right? So Bree starts out, quick response. It kept taking longer, right? As she's processing, how do I articulate the answer to what Bree's asking? So we kept going around before we finally got to that nugget, right?
Yeah. There's like some digging, right? And it's tied to that like assumption. I think Amber said it in there. It's like, excuse me, I assume I know what that means. Right. But when I've lost count of how many times somebody will say, oh, that felt good. And then we check in, well, what does good feel like? And what happens after that question is just like, what? I said, good, we're done with it, right? Why are you asking, like, don't you know what that is? And the reality is that word, especially in that experience, means something, even if it's just a little bit different. That little bit of difference is where curiosity comes. In asking questions like, and this is what we call testing assumptions, the reason so many of our conversations get really shut down is because we assume the answer. And when our brain assumes the answer, we don't check it, curiosity dies. Curiosity is works so much like a muscle, right? If your brain doesn't think there's anything to discover, it's not going to do the work to do it. So, but like so many times when we test that simple, like, oh, that was a great day. Well, why was it a great day? And the brilliant one at the end, Bree, of like, how did you know they were having a good time? Which is almost like a dangerous one. Like, are you sure? You know what I mean? But the beauty of that is now in answering, Amber's brain says, oh, this is what to look for next time, right? This, and it reinforces like, oh, this is my indicator. This is the thing that it was. And now that's clear. And again, most of the time, like, how was your day? It was great. What did you do? I went with the kids and it was fun. Cool. And that's the end of the conversation. We've not discovered, and more importantly, we've not connected. Because for that feeling, for our brain to register connection, and that's what our dorsal anterior thing is looking for, like for our brain to feel that sense of connection and lower that sense of isolation, there has to be some sort of understanding. And if I just tell you my opinion of my day, I've not actually told you anything about me. And until we're sharing stuff about each other, connection isn't happening. Yeah. Or at least it's not happening to the degree that happens in this conversation when you see somebody leaning forward, or, you know, like when you're at the end and you're one or two questions away from making the other person cry. Not that we need to do that all of the time, but the reason that emotional response happens so much is that, like, when we're able to connect on these like, we say it's not connecting on something in common, but the things that are common, right, between us, our challenges, loving things, like engaging, like, and in this case, like connecting on that experience, like that allows our brain to feel less isolated. And it sends this kind of relaxing kind of message that can actually be like, oh, everything's going to be okay. And most of that's happening subconsciously, but like, hey, and Darren knows it was a thing that was throwing me off when we were first doing these as experiments 3 years ago. Is like, we would have so many people come on talking to strangers and all of a sudden they're crying. And we're like, we just asked you what went well today. Like, what's with the waterworks? and it's that, and especially 3 years ago, it was in the midst of the pandemic, and people, like, we have an innate not just desire, but a biological need to connect to other human beings, right? And to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And that is so lacking in individuals that, like, when they experience it for the first time, it can be pretty overwhelming. Or if you got somebody like Bree, who's just a ninja with the questions, and she kind of makes it her job to make you cry within 5 minutes, which she loves to do with me, right? And she about did with Amber, then that's there too.
Well, and I want to add on to, you know, commenting on Darren's comment of the long pauses and how it ties into, you know, that connection piece that you were talking about, Brian, as well. So something that often happens when we have these conversations and in our practice sessions, it's often uncomfortable when it takes a long time for someone to respond, or if it takes a long time for someone to come up with a question. And that's where, like, the magic happens. And often it is so hard for us to just sit there and wait for someone to respond because they're thinking about it. We want to put something out there. We want to say, let me make this easier for you. Let me give you an example response. But when we actually take a step back and allow them to think about their response and go somewhere that they haven't gone before, that's creating like an insane amount of connection. So the longer the response time, the deeper the connection that people are experiencing. And it's important for us to allow that time to happen. It's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm awkward, it's silence, like, let me fix it. You
And
don't have to.
for the interview, for the extroverts that are listening or that are in this group, and I'm pointing at myself, that's the hardest thing to do. Like extroverts just run over introverts all the time because we can't shut up and we don't like silence, right? And so like we'll ask a question and we'll get like 2 seconds of silence and, oh, I'm going to come save you and I'm going to talk now. And now the person has been processing and trying to think of this question that's new that I have to like that initially I don't have an answer to, and you remove their opportunity to have an answer. So is Bree saying like you ask the question and stop? Yeah, go ahead, Amanda.
I just had brunch with 6 realtors, and my head
Did
is
you get to
spinning.
talk at all? I don't know. Sorry.
And I just like, we were in like, there's so many half conversations that happened that like we didn't even finish because somebody took a breath or a drink of water. Like it's, I keep wanting to, I want to bring this to my office.
Well, it's funny. I'm actually, what is it? Next Tuesday, we're doing a half a day with a group of 30 or 40 real estate agents to talk about, you know, how this works with connection with your clients and why, because like, if you look at sales and especially in things like real estate or financial services, the number one complaint that clients have, anybody want to guess what that is? It's that the real estate agent or the salesperson does not listen. And if you talk to a real, what's that? Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Next week, whatever you're doing?
Oh, right. Can you jump in? Well, it's an in-person one that's, so I don't know if the client will allow other people to jump in, but the bit behind it is, and why it's counterintuitive actually, is that like, and with these real estate agents I'll talk to next week, if you ask any of them, if they listen to their clients, they will all tell you yes, and they'll have good evidence for it because they'll say, I've asked them their goals, I've asked them their problems, I've asked them all of these things. But what's happening, and they're listening in that, they're getting the information, but what the client's talking about is not listening per se. It's not, did you give me time to talk? Did you ask about what I wanted? The client is using listening to actually talk about connection. I don't feel understood. I don't feel heard. And you can ask about goals, you can ask about opinions, you can ask about someone's problems for hours and the individual can still leave without feeling connected, without feeling understood. Because we have to ask about their story. And that's one of the design functions of a question as simple as what's a good thing that happened in your day, is because we're asking about their experience, not a projection. And SOFA, suggestions, opinion, feedback, or advice, those are all projections. That's who I might be, who I think I want to be, but it doesn't tell you who I am. Right. So that simple distinction can be pretty powerful, but it's easy to overlook. Yeah. What else did y'all notice in the conversation? Yeah. And if there isn't some in the conversation, what questions do you have about the question or how you would use a question like this? Yeah. What or maybe even where might you try using a question like this? Pavlos, you're here for the first time, so I'm really interested in your perspective. If you want to share, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the questions were relatively simple. Like they didn't come across as particularly sort of really sort of personal questions. Really I don't know what the right way to say it is, but on superficially, sort of, following the story, getting a bit more detail, but did require some thought. And as has already been mentioned, saying, I had a good time, or why, what is it about that connection? Why is it that you had? Why did you feel that way? Many people wouldn't automatically have a stock answer to that. So Yeah, the questions. Yeah, I think the simplicity and the directness of the questions, I think, is what came across to me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you saw that, because it's actually one of the hardest things to teach. If I'm as people get into after the first question, and it's hard to teach because for two reasons. Somebody will look at a question like this and they have this expectation of like, oh, now we're going to have a deep conversation. And if I hear that, I'm like, no, now you're not going to have a conversation because you're expecting to have a deep conversation. Right. And that sounds really counterintuitive, but the reason that can like limit the chances of having an actual really good connection is because when I make that expectation of someone else, I'm removing that person's like autonomy in the discussion. Right. I'm not necessarily interested in what they're saying as much as I'm interested in us having an experience. Right. And that, like, while that experience might happen, that we call like the authentic curiosity is what we call it, but like just being interested in their story is the thing that like makes the connection. It's also the thing that makes these easier. But the challenge is it makes it harder because we have these, I hear it from parents all the time. Oh, I keep asking my kid what the best part of his day was, and he won't answer. And so I'll say, well, why are you asking? Well, I want him to. And I was like, that's all I need to know. Because you want him to experience something or him to do something versus I'm interested in his story. I want him to experience something that's different than I'm interested in his story.
I
Because if
loved
I'm
your Facebook post about that the other day. I actually shared it about how like be selfish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Selfish,
so
be selfish.
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive. And I think one of the easiest ways to explain it is like every one of us either reads a book, watches TV and movies, or some sort of story. We're all looking for stories, watching TV, reading books, and all of those are us consuming story. The challenge is when we go in conversation, we think the only value is when we're telling the story versus, and all Bree is doing is getting the story, right? And that's where it's like, I'm selfishly looking for the story, and I might be looking because asking you what was the most interesting thing that happened in your day is going to be an entertaining story. What was the most engaging thing that happened in your day might be an inspiring story. But when I hear your story, I can learn from it in a non-judgmental way, and not even learn from it. I can be influenced by it, if you will, right? And so, and when I'm looking to be influenced by your story, then it's so much easier for you to share it. Because you don't feel like I'm just asking you to the value situation gets so thrown off when I'm like, hey, I just want to give you 10 minutes to talk and say whatever you need to say. Did you notice how that feels? Like I'm saying, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to talk, but you almost naturally feel this sense of obligation. It's like saying, I'm going to come and mow your lawn for free. And while that might sound good, in the back of your head, you just said, okay, yeah, but when am I going to have to pay that back? Right? I actually would just rather pay you to mow my lawn so I don't have to think about, and it's like value exchange that's kind of subconsciously happening. I want to jump in the chat here. I think the questions felt like they were
comment
repetitive.
from Godswill. So Godswill said, I think the questions felt like they were repetitive until closer inspection is paid. By default, I tend to feel I need to ask something else for the sake of novelty, whereas holding that spot can provide better answers and then connections, which I love that observation, Godswill, because yes, it sounds like they are repetitive questions. And some of them are super obvious questions of like, what did good feel like? What did laughter feel like? Those, they are, to Pavlos's point as well, very simple questions, but we don't ever dig it. never ask those questions of each other. So that's why it can dig into that deeper connection, to your point, Godswill. So thank you for that observation.
And it's really, again, going back to like curiosity as a muscle, like once your brain starts to experience like, oh, I can take a simple word and like find out so much about an individual, then like conversations are so much easier. Like, and if you're like me, and sometimes you get into like a group setting and everybody expects you to be the one talking, like you can toss out one question and never have to say a word the rest of the night. And everybody's like, oh, you were so great in the conversation. Like you didn't say anything, right? Like that's been like the secret, like, but like for me, the secret to where I use this tool a lot is like, oh, I've been talking all day. I'm going to toss this question out to the group and I'm going to back away. Tanya, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi. I noticed, to me, it brought more and more clarity. It was like an aperture opening wider and wider as we went through. Like I understood both people better, and I could also see Bree understanding oh gosh, I've just lost Amber and Amanda. Sorry, I think so better. So and that to me is about authenticity. It's about getting a clearer, more authentic, robust understanding of both people.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, Tanya, tell me a little bit more about like, because you said you got a clear understanding of both people. Tell me a little bit more about like how you got a clear understanding of Bree, because that's absolutely happening. And I love that you pointed that out.
Because she, what I got was that she is fully engaged and thinking about how to open that aperture more. Like it seems not contrived, but active. It was active on her part, engagement, and that tells me about her, that she's not doing something rote, or that she wants to know. Just what you're saying.
Yeah,
she wants to know.
What message would you assume that might have sent to Amber?
I would assume that message that it sent to Amber would be one of validation, and also affirmation and value.
Yeah. I kind of try to explain it real simply. Like you can tell somebody you care 20 times, but when you're interested, you make them feel cared for. And that memory of feeling cared for is so much more powerful than being told you care, right? Like, and this is for me, the brilliance of questions is like, whatever you're trying to influence in, especially in the affirmative or positive, like you're good, you're smart, I care for you, all of these things. Like if I design a question, I can communicate all of those so much more powerfully, because it gives the other person, because I'm letting it come out of the other person, right? Like my brain design is like when somebody says, and Bree knows this, you're really good at this. It doesn't matter what it is. My first response, Bree, is
No, I'm not.
Yeah, like it's some sort of like downplaying it. No, I'm not, and that's not good. Like I get off of a stage and I just talked to 100 people and everybody's all excited, and my first thing is like, I really screwed that up, right? And that's natural for all of us. And so in that case, like Bree can come and say all day, like you did great, you did all of this stuff. But if instead in that situation, like what part of it were you proud about? Right, simple, right? And then now like getting into that, like what did you notice were the positive, what were the positive responses that you did notice, right? Like, or if I really think it bombed, like, hey, what part of that sucked the least, you know? Like that's where we call that the non-negative question. But like it allows me, like I can even validate, like, yeah, that was hard, and what part of that you know, what part of like really directing that and you know, like helping them feel cared for, helping them feel understood, as opposed to telling them that those sorts of things. Godswill says, do you think that the questions helped establish points of mutual experience across both Amber and Bree? Bree, will you want to take that question? I've got a response to it, but I'd love to hear yours. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, there's two ways that you could approach a conversation like that. I could have easily just gone, oh, I love having brunch with my family too, and then take it down that road. So that's, and we often do that, and that often undermines the person sharing, that's initially sharing. But what I did have going on in the back of my mind while I was asking Amber these questions was, I have a 4-month-old daughter, and I want to have experiences like that. I want to have that belly aching laughter. And you know, girls brunch out maybe, or something along those lines. And so when I'm asking those questions, I'm putting myself into Amber's shoes of, tell me how you did this. Tell me what it felt like. And I can assume the feeling, but I want to know how it was for you. So there's definitely that I'm relating back, but I'm not giving her my experience. I'm taking in her experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's in psychology speak, it's self-referencing,
Yeah.
right? I'm referencing my experience in relation to the experience I'm hearing. That does not happen when you're talking about opinions, right? If you ask somebody like, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? That self-referencing won't happen. You'll actually move into like, here's why I think it, here's why I think, but you're like, that self-referencing happens because there isn't a like status differential. There isn't a challenge, if you will, of like, once I ask you like, so there's a difference in asking like, when were you happy today? And what makes you happy? You hear that difference? When I said, when were you happy today? I'm listening to your experience. What makes you happy? You're just now going to tell me your opinion. And my brain's going to process those two in very distinctly different ways. One is going to, the experience one is the thing that connects us. I can understand, I can self-reference as long as I stay in that experience piece. But once I start asking you about your opinion or your advice on that, like now my brain is actually starting to categorize you. It's starting to use those words through my filter, right? And so we've been taught like, oh, we build connection by talking about things we have in common. But that can be a really dangerous situation, right? Not dangerous, it's probably, I mean, it can be in some situations, but like, so for instance, somebody will go into a group and say, we have nothing in common. And I always challenge that, right? Because if I go into a group and they say, oh, we're a bunch of football players, I'm mediocre on football, I was a rugby player, right? And so it's easy to be, I don't have, they like football, I like rugby, we don't have anything in common. But you all, just in hearing that definition, what is common? And this is where in common versus is common. If I'm in a room full of football players and I'm a rugby player, what do you think is common? We might not have this thing in common, but what do you think is common? What are common experiences that we might have?
Concussions.
What do y'all think? Go ahead, Darren. What's that?
I said concussions.
So that's something in common, right? But underneath that, but like
Athletes.
yeah, okay, yeah. So again, athletes is in common, but what do athletes do?
They work together.
So hey, tell me about working as a team, and tell me your experience of like when teamwork was really helpful to you, right? Tell me about like, if you're in sports at all, like overcoming challenges is a thing. Like tell me about a time, you know, like you had to overcome a challenge, right? What is it that excites you about competition, right? Again, those now we're into underlying things that that go across the board. And we can start with the thing in common, but we have to work to the thing that is common, right? Like, and so I love it when somebody says, I really like football, and you toss into like, why? They stop. What do you mean, why? Like, oh, what do you like about it? Like you like just watching the game, or do you like the, and that's where it starts again. Now I've taken this, what would have been like, you like football? Yep. What team is yours? Yep. Here's my team, and here's why I like that team, into like, no, what is it about it? Because that answer is going to be different for every person, right? Well, I actually, and I can't tell you, like, I got a bunch of rugby player, football player friends, who don't generally dive into deeper conversations, but I can't tell you how many times like I'll do that with a like, well, why do you like football? Like, where did you first grow to actually love this thing? And then all of a sudden now I'm hearing a story about like sitting on the couch with their old man, and like this was the thing I looked forward to every week, because this was just the 1 hour that nobody was yelling at each other, because we were all yelling at the screen, right? Yeah, and so now we're getting into the actual experience, and now what could have stopped with I like football is now an understanding of here's who I am. And so that like that simple shift to get underneath into that understanding, it's, what do we define it, right, Bree? It's like the most simple hard thing you'll ever do. Something like that. Like it's simple on the face, but like getting good at it it takes work, right? Like, and again, that's what the practice sessions, and that's what we've outlined, the learning to be not just like, here's how to learn it. It's like, how do we do it so we get more comfortable? How do we create more comfort for other people so it's easier for them to do? Yeah. Any other questions? We have just a couple more minutes before we're about to be questions or comments. I think this is a great conversation today. Yeah. And even Bree or Amber, you all have anything else to add towards the end?
Yeah, I'll just add on. If anyone's interested in trying this on, we do have our base level membership is free for the first 2 weeks and only $5 a month after that. But come and try it on. Come and practice some questions in a safe space with people that are in the same position as you, just wanting to try this out and make connections. And I lead the practice sessions on Fridays at 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. Mountain Time. So you get to work with me a little bit there instead of this old guy.
Yeah. And for any of those on the fence about jumping into the facilitator program, this Thursday we're doing the first transformational listening module. We'll do a module each week of the month, and it's every time it's updated. I'm so excited about this Thursday. It's gonna be a lot of fun. But if you want any more information about that, we're happy to answer it, because we do this at workshops, we do the keynotes, we do, and we're creating more ways for people to kind of come and incorporate that through the membership or through the facilitator program and other programs that'll be launching in the next month or two. Most importantly, at the end of this is like thinking about the question of the week. What's a good thing that happened in your day? Like, there is a lot that goes into these conversations, but you don't need to know all of that to start having the conversations, right? Just being able to say, like, approaching somebody and saying, hey, can I ask you a different question that I heard from some weird guy on the internet today? Like, I just like, maybe it'll go well, maybe it won't, right? Like, but would you mind just trying something different? And I recommend that because that makes it safer for the other person, right? But then trying on the question with no expectation, right? As you just saw in the conversation with Bree and Amber, like the only expectation is to learn about them, to find out about their experience. And if you really focus on questioning your assumptions that you don't know what they mean when they say whatever word, even though you think you know what they mean, right? Then we increase understanding and connection in any conversation, right? We just got to do that extra little work of not taking it for granted, not thinking that our assumption about them is true, because it's not, because we haven't lived their experience. And in that opens the door for connection. And the beauty of not knowing their experience, not living their experiences, is that's how we get to create understanding, connection with each other. So simple conversations can be really powerful moments, really inspiring, exciting, funny, if we just look for the story. So thank you all. It's a great hour. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and kill the recording. Or did I? Or can